Pirate God Level Cartoonist, Chapter 341 to 360. Chapter 341 Big Mom, Try to Live. Under the leadership of Pokemus, Marco and his party soon came to the meeting square in the center of Cake Island. As soon as they arrived at the square, a waiter in a black dress came over and respectfully led Marco and his party to the southeast corner of the banquet hall. There are so many people. After Jinguduo took his seat, he looked at the dark crowd on the banquet hall with a look of shock in his eyes. It can be seen that this square was originally opened on the basis of the original square, with an area of tens of thousands of square meters, which is amazing. However, even in such a huge square, most of the space was already filled with people at this time, and a steady stream of people came from afar to take their seats. All seats are in a half-moon shape, surrounding the high platform at the front of the square. On the left and right of the high platform, there are square objects wrapped in red cloth, about a few cubic meters in size. I don't know what is inside. A group of guys with a flaming tendency. Marco glanced around coldly, then leaned on the back of the chair and closed his eyes. There was still some time before the banquet started, so he had to think carefully about what to do next. It is best that all members can go back safely while sweeping the face of BIGMOM. But at this moment, a feeling of being watched suddenly came to mind, and Marco raised his head subconsciously and looked towards the window on the top floor of the castle in front of him. However, nothing. Shaking his head, Marco laughed self-deprecatingly, and then closed his eyes again. HMPH, Vigilant Brat. The top floor window, through the curtains, staring at Marco for a while, BIGMOM could not help but let out a cold snort. The matter of the port had already reached her ears, and she naturally knew that Marco and the others were definitely not here with good intentions. Why did I let them in? Is it to kill them? Big MOM turned to look at the bright room behind him. In the center of the room, a young man with black hair and black eyes leaned lazily on a luxurious chair, taking a sip of the blood-red wine in his hand from time to time, and drank it for himself. It was Roha, who came from the capital of the Seven Waters. Hearing BIGMOM's words, Roha chuckled and said, "How is it possible? I still like the Whitebeard pirates very much." That's it. Big MOM frowned. With Whitebeard's character, it is estimated that Marco and the others will not be deliberately allowed to do childish things like making trouble. It is estimated that the cadres are not angry enough, and they arbitrarily made decisions and ordered Whitebeard to watch the ceremony. But no one else knows about it. Think about it, if you fell out with the Whitebeard pirates and were attacked by rumors that you had deceived the Red Hair pirates and the Dimensional Brigade, who would be happiest? Roha shook the goblet in his hand with a faint smile on his face. OM was silent for a while, then he said with a solemn expression, "Navy." Yes, it is the Navy. Now that their strength has been greatly damaged, they urgently need to restore their prestige, and a completely isolated four emperors, isn't it their best goal? Roha looked up at IGMOM with a smile on his face. Although Roha's purpose has been known for a long time, BIGMOM's heart is still extremely uncomfortable, as if he was oppressed by a boulder. You can really guarantee that you will help me build a country? Build a real world? Big MOM walked to Roha, put his hands on the table, and stared at Roha. Of course, as long as... Roha raised the glass and paid tribute to BIGMOM. Through the scarlet wine in the glass, BIGMOM's figure was constantly twisted, fluctuated, and stained with scarlet blood. You can survive. Survive. BIGMOM has not known how long it has been, and has not heard anyone talk to him like this, but what Roha said is indeed the truth. She traded with Roha, the only uncertain link is, can she survive? BIGMOM had a gloomy expression on his face, and stood there without speaking. For a moment, the whole room fell into silence again. I don't know how long it took, when there was a sudden sound of cheers like a tsunami from the outside, and bursts of sound rushed into the room, awakening BIGMOM in his meditation. It's time for you to appear, and I should go too. Roja drank the last drink in the glass, stood up, and walked towards the other end of the room. "Don't forget our deal," Big Mom shouted at Roja's back. However, only Roja's disappearing figure was harvested. Standing silent for a while, Big Mom's eyes showed a trace of determination as he walked towards the high platform outside the castle. Walking out of the castle, there is a scarlet carpet leading to the high platform. On the left and right of the carpet, there are the main members of the Big Mom pirates. Mom. 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 Ellipsis 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 ellipsis. 9 flowers. Big Mom, dressed in gorgeous clothes, walked on the carpet. The cadres on the left and right sides lowered their bodies and knelt down on one knee, their faces full of excitement. When Big Mom finally stepped onto the high stage, the music echoing in the square finally reached its final climax. As Big Mom raised one hand high, located on both sides of the high platform, the objects covered with red cloth finally appeared in front of everyone. The dazzling light stung everyone's eyes, and there were bursts of exclamations from the crowd. "My God, what did I see? Really, where did Big Mom get so much gold? She really found Ralph Drew. It's actually true. The red stone tablet and the text on it are really the historical text of the road sign. 4 blocks of road sign historical text. That's right, those things that were covered by the red cloth before were 4 historical texts and countless treasures. Nearly 1,000 tons of gold, tens of thousands of diamonds, countless jewels, and various rare treasures were all displayed in front of everyone. Brilliant and luxurious. Such a huge wealth made everyone shut their mouths. Even if there was a look of greed in their eyes, no one dared to show it in front of the cadres of Big Mom and the Big Mom pirates. Now, no one should doubt that I've been to Ralph Drew anymore, right? Big Mom stood on the high platform, his huge body exuding boundless domineering, and everyone bowed their heads wherever their eyes swept. Only Marco and others looked directly at him. A sneer in the direction of the Whitebeard pirates, Big Mom picked up the microphone and started his speech. Big Mom became the king and announced the establishment of all nations. On the same day, the Whitebeard pirates, led by the captain of the 1st Division Marco, the captain of the 5th Division Bista, and the captain of the 11th Division Jingudo, questioned Big Mom in public, believing that she was not worthy of the position of One Piece. However, in the face of Big Mom's tyrannical strength, even if Marco tried his best, it would not help, and he was expelled from the country in embarrassment. After this incident, for some reason, the Whitebeard pirates did not counterattack. A while, the name of One Piece, Big Mom resounded all over the world. However, the turmoil caused by Big Mom did not end. Chapter 342 Founding. Big Mom declared king, 3 days later. At night, at the port of the Kingdom of Prudence. Night, pitch black. The moon is as bright as silver. The silver-white moonlight spreads over the boundless sea, bringing charming light to the dark sea. This is the Kingdom of Prudence. As a kingdom located in the New World, the military power of the Kingdom of Prudence is naturally not comparable to the Kingdom of the Four Seas. Moreover, they also have the power to suppress a country. King of War, Elisabello II. Elisabello II, who has the name of King of War, has a stunt called King's Fist. Elisabello II, relying on his inherent tyrannical body, unleashed a heavy punch, which can instantly penetrate the fortress of the empire with just one blow. If you hit it, you will be killed on the spot. With such a strong guard guarding, small and medium-sized pirates naturally dare not come here to make trouble, which also makes the Kingdom of Prudence far more peaceful than Dressrosa of the Alliance. Today, however, a group of uninvited guests come to visit. Whoa. A huge pirate ship slowly rose from the bottom of the sea and floated above the sea. One after another, burly pirates with murderous faces poured out of the cabin, stood on the deck, and stared at the quiet port in the distance. On their heads, a banner with a skull crossed by candies, top hats and pink hair flutters in the wind. Big Mom Pirates. Is this the kingdom of Prudence? Katakuri crossed his arms and walked to the front of the deck. You can't be wrong, it's the guy who is known as the King of War, the kingdom where he lives, the King of War. Ha 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 ha. On the pirate ship on the right, the cracker was hidden among the biscuit soldiers, grinning. Don't be careless, that guy claims to be able to kill the 4 emperors with one punch. Charlotte Smoothie said, standing on the bow of the pirate ship on the left, but there was no sound in that tone. The slightest hint of caution was instead filled with a strong sense of sarcasm. For those of them who lived beside Bigmom, no one knew the power of the 4 emperors better than them. Kill the 4 emperors with one punch. That's just a rumor. Domineering of the armed color, just the body of Bigmom is already stronger than the fortress. A mere king, dare to be so arrogant. I-11 is greater than or equal to underscore. A faint killing intent was brewing in the hearts of several people. Bu Ruo Elizabello too, knowing that the kingdom of Prudence was targeted by the Big Mom pirates because of other people's false words, I'm afraid I would like to cut my belly in minutes. But having said that, the reason why the rumor of killing the 4 emperors in one punch is known to the world is actually the reason why the kingdom of Prudence is behind it. After all, the stronger the kingdom is, the less pirates will dare to come, and the life of the people will naturally be more comfortable. Originally, with the temper of Bigmom, she would not pay attention to this clown who is thousands of miles away, but who told her that she needs a kingdom now. Therefore, the kingdom of Prudence, which has been rarely disturbed by pirates for a long time, has entered the sight of Auntie. Come over here and arrange for you the direction of everyone's attack. Katakuri took out a map and beckoned to the 2 people around him and the rest of the cadres. Soon, the crowd gathered around. According to the intelligence, there are about 10,000 permanent defenders of Prudence, scattered in the 3 military camps of the kingdom and the palace, and the order given to us by my mother is to completely control the kingdom before dawn, so we to attack at the same time. Besides this, there is also the place where the ministers of the kingdom live, and we must also control it together. That's it. It's very simple, these 3 military camps have been handed over to me. Before dawn, none of them will want to live. Kaligia suddenly said from the side. Cricket. Next is the point. Katakuri glared at Cracker and said solemnly, because we are going to take over this kingdom, so this time, try to avoid killing a lot of ordinary people and troops. Lest there be a backlash within the kingdom. Quote. Keep the royal family too. Smoothie frowned. Keep it. Don't. You won't kill if you don't kill. A lot of drugs have been prepared for you in the cabin to control them. Finally, let me reiterate that this kingdom is the starting point of my mother's dream. If anyone can't control himself and start killing people, causing problems with mother's control of the kingdom, don't blame me for sending you to my mother in person. Katakuri glanced at everyone coldly, with an extremely indifferent tone. When they heard that they were going to be sent to their mother, everyone shuddered and recalled the last tragedy of those who had angered their mother. The extraction of life expectancy, cruel torture, public execution, and many terrifying methods made them shudder. Do you understand? Katakuri shouted sharply. Understood. Everyone responded in a low voice. Then start preparing, and in 15 minutes, start moving. With an order, everyone jumped up one after another, returned to their ship, and began intensive preparations. Soon, 15 minutes passed. Katakuri, who was sitting on the bow, slowly opened his eyes, and the boat under his feet moved. Behind them, thousands of pirates drew their weapons from their waists, and the cold light shone on the sea. 10 minutes later, the port of the Kingdom of Prudence was attacked, the defenders were instantly suppressed, and the urgent sound of alarms echoed over the kingdom. 2 hours later, the 3 military camps in the kingdom were suppressed, and more than half of the 8,000 kingdom soldiers were seriously injured and unconscious. 2.5 hours later, the Palace of Prudence exploded with a huge explosion of 5.7. A powerful and domineering punch ran through the entire palace. The small half of the palace was reduced to ruins, and the majestic figure of Elisabello II could be vaguely seen, standing at the starting point of boxing power. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, Katakuri imprisoned all the royal family, including Queen Elisabello II, in the dungeon. Early the next morning, the Big Mom pirates announced that they had officially occupied the Kingdom of Protons. Renamed it Wangguo. In the declaration, all nations are a country where all races and food can live together equally. No matter what kind of evil they have done, no matter what organization they belong to, whether they are male or female, old or young, poor or rich, anyone can join the nations and live under the protection of BIGMOM. As soon as the declaration came out, the world shook. Chapter 343 Trapped Beast equals World Government. BIGMOM's movements are quite fast. In the Seven Waters, Roha was lying on his back on his hair, browsing the information in Skynet. Pirates build a country. This incident can be regarded as the first time in the world. On the first day that BIGMOM issued the declaration, the Skynet forum exploded, and everyone was discussing about BIGMOM and the world. Grass the grass. Pirates build a country. Are you right? Do pirates know how to run a country? That's right. Is there something wrong with the Big Mom pirates? She doesn't think everyone is a dimensional brigade, and she can rule wherever she wants. Pay attention to the words upstairs. The dimensional brigade has never ruled anywhere. Be careful of being targeted by the world government. Don't make any guesses. I think it's very likely that Auntie came for real this time. The brother of my uncle's nephew's wife is working in the naval staff. According to him, the anti-pirates are occupying Kuluo this time. In the kingdom of Denzo 8, none of the ministers in the kingdom were killed. Instead, they were all rewarded with a lot of money to help them rule the country. Moreover, the ant is still putting up a reward on the black market to recruit any talents who can govern the country, as long as the ability enough, ask for money, and for officials. Quote. Would you give it to a woman? Would you give it to a woman? Quote. Quote. The copy party upstairs will be quiet for a while, and talk about the business. Do you see how reliable the anti-pirates said about the world? I have a friend who used to be a slave, and I'm a little moved. Slave, going to all countries. Is there something wrong? It would be great to come to the Seven Waters. That's right, I think people from all countries are probably all pirates or vicious guys. Otherwise, whoever goes to that 10,000 kingdoms for normal people, who knows what pirates can govern? Don't talk about normal people. According to the information I got, not many pirates go there. As for the reason, you know. What do you know? Is the world government going to do it? Or is it the cruel methods that Auntie used to do? It's all there. After watching for a while, Roha closed the forum. The remarks on the forum are very uniform, and they are all not optimistic about BIGMOM's world. In addition to doubts about the pirates' ruling ability, the cruel methods used by Ant to treat her kingdom are also a major reason for everyone's resistance. Before Auntie, only a part of the people in the New World knew about the behavior of charging its residents for life expectancy every month. Known things. This time, some people who had planned to go to Wangguo started to retreat again. In addition to these, the most important thing is the attitude of the Navy. Whether it is a dealer or a pawn or a power leader, they all understand a few things. One piece is an existence that opposes the world government. The Kingdom of Protons is one of the kingdoms under the world government. Occupying the Kingdom of Protons and issuing a declaration of founding to the world is different from the previous 4 emperors who sheltered the kingdom and received tribute. It can be said that this move by Auntie is tantamount to riding in the face of the world government. In this case, the attitude of the world government has become a matter of concern to everyone. It is a severe rebuke, sending troops to encircle and suppress, and drive out the Big Mom pirates. He still pretended not to know, stayed still, and made some small movements behind his back. I don't know when. The world's confidence in the world government is not as strong as it used to be. It is even said that not many people will think about whether the world government will immediately send troops to crush the Big Mom pirates with the momentum of thunder. 5 old stars, 5-2, the General Qingzi mysteriously disappeared. In the Holy Land Mary Joa, the army commander Cyborg was severely injured. The Marine headquarters, Marine Fando, was invaded by one person. In front of everyone's eyes, the mysterious man directly kidnapped the great scientist Vegapunk in front of tens of thousands of navies. In the G5 branch, the hero Garp and the mysterious man fought head-to-head and returned bleak. A series of things, no matter how much the world government covers up, can't cover up. One thing has been leaked, gradually destroying the world's confidence in the world government and the navy, and even said that because of the shady secrets of various Tianlong people and nobles, many people are disgusted with the production of the world government. Heart. Not to mention other places, the habit of only recognizing the Dimensional Brigade and not the world government has been formed in the vicinity of the Seven Waters. In their opinion, the Dimension Brigade is much more reliable than the world government. Outside the capital of the Seven Waters, the newly emerging United Kingdom in the South China Sea and the kingdom ruled by the Revolutionary Army behind the East China Sea have gradually spread the message of happiness for the people, which is in stark contrast to the rule of the surrounding world governments. I don't know when, the world government has already stood on the edge of the cliff, and the next step is the abyss. It has come to this point, you have no choice. Roha closed the Skynet, leaned his head on the sofa, looked at the ceiling, and his eyes flashed with confidence. The world government at this time is like a trapped beast. Although it has arrogant physical strength and sharp fangs, it cannot escape the cage and can only wait for the end of death. The beasts are still fighting. I would like to see your final counterattack. Open black lens bracket. I owe more to make up for it. Close black lens bracket. Chapter 344 Platinum Battleship, Reinforcements of the World Government. Naval Headquarters, Marin Vando. Sengoku sat at the head of the conference room with a heavy expression, and on either side of him sat Garp, Crane, Zephyr, Fujitora, and all the lieutenant admirals of the Navy headquarters who stayed behind in Marinfando. As for Sakazuki and Kizaru, because of the founding of BIGMOM, they have been sent to the G5 branch to guard. The room was silent, everyone looked at the report in front of them, and their faces were a little ugly. Looking up at the people present, Warring States said, "What do you think after seeing this? It can't be tolerated. They must be annihilated immediately." Someone immediately said, "Yes, mobilize the military and destroy them in one go. They cannot be allowed to continue to be arrogant." Several lieutenant generals were the first to speak, with excited expressions, as if they wished to slay BIGMOM immediately. "How many people do you think we need to dispatch to go to the New World, in the homeland of the pirates, to annihilate the Big Mom pirates?" Crane asked suddenly. Hearing this, the atmosphere in the conference room suddenly froze. "We sent." Several excited lieutenant generals looked at each other, and just wanted to open their mouths to speak, but immediately frowned and began to think. Due to the recruitment of soldiers in the world some time ago, the position of general has been filled, and there is even a general-level powerhouse code-named Green Bull, because he lost half a move in the competition with Fujitora and succumbed to the position of lieutenant general. The reason why he didn't come to this meeting was because he was chasing pirates overseas. Then, if you calculate the high-end combat power that can be used, the Warring States general can't move, neither can the Steel Bone commander. In addition, Marin Fanduo needs at least a general-level combat force to be stationed. Then, there are only 3 remaining generals, besides Garp, Zephyr, and Crane. And then what? It seems gone. Even if Marin Fando did not need to be stationed by a general, it seemed that he would be able to gather the 3 powerful generals, Garp, Zephyr, and Green Bull, 6 powerful combat powers. This kind of power may be able to compete head-on with the 4 Emperor-level pirates, and of course they can have an advantage. If they are to be annihilated, I am afraid they will suffer heavy losses. And don't forget, it's a new world there. It's fighting in the homeland of pirates. There are countless pirates at any time, waiting for both sides to fight and lose both, and come up to pick up bargains. Not to mention, the rest of the 4 Emperor-level pirates are not used for 2. As long as there is another 4 Emperor-level pirate group, they can be fatally injured. It wasn't until I thought of this that the few guys who were present with long muscles and no brains suddenly realized and discovered in horror. They actually can't do anything about the Big Mom pirates. It is impossible to go on an expedition at all. Okay, don't worry about it, warring states should come up with a solution. Crane knew those hot-headed guys, and after calming down, he opened his mouth to comfort. At the end, he turned his head to look at the warring states period and hooked the corners of his mouth. Don't be a fool, since you have gathered so many people together, have you come up with a solution? I want them to think about it for a while. Warring states looked at the Crane helplessly, shook his head, and stood up. The establishment of a country by pirates is naturally intolerable, and you also know the recent situation of the government. In order to restore your prestige and combat the arrogance of the pirates, this expedition is bound to be won. For this, the government has given our utmost support. Quote. As he spoke, Sengoku opened the curtains of the conference room and pointed out the window, the port of Marin Vando. That's the support the world governments have given us. At the port, the densely packed Navy soldiers hurriedly arranged the queue and set up an array to welcome important people. On the sea in the distance, a platinum battleship as huge as a hill was slowly heading towards Marin Vando. The theme of the battleship is pure white, with golden embellishments on the edges and corners, flashing bursts of dazzling light. Just at a glance, you can feel a noble wind blowing head-on. When they saw the ship, a few people in the conference room suddenly stood up, their faces full of surprise. Even Fujitora and Crane, 2 easygoing people, could not help frowning, and looked at Sengoku in doubt, and then looked at the platinum battleship in the distance. Warring states, don't tell me that the battleship with the flag of the Tianlong people is the reinforcements sent by the government. He frowned and said. It's them, and on that boat are the patriarchs of the 3 Tianlong people. Warring states nodded lightly, as if he didn't notice the disgust for the Tianlong people in the Crane's tone. However, after hearing Sengoku's words, the conference room exploded. Dragon people, are you kidding me? How did they become our reinforcements supported by the world government? That is, can the guys from the Tianlong people go to the battlefield? It is a question of whether they can win a Navy soldier with 10 of them together. I don't want to talk about combat power, but if those bastards follow in the fleet, I'm afraid they will cause a lot of trouble. Don't forget the virtues of those guys. Maybe when they march, they want women and entertainment, hee. Quote. HMPH, maybe, in my opinion, those guys from the Tianlong people who are greedy for life and fear of death will be scared to pee their pants when they go to the battlefield. Most of the people present sneered, even though they were nominally affiliated with the Navy under the name of Tianlongren, but no one had a good impression of Tianlongren. It is very possible to ask for women, food, and entertainment during the march, and even they doubt whether the Tianlong people can withstand the long journey and reach the battlefield smoothly. Okay, don't talk about it. The specific reason involves the government's secrets. As long as you know about this crusade, you are bound to win. Tomorrow, I will select members to participate in the crusade. Now, disband. Seeing that in the conference room, the discussion about the Tianlong people intensified, and the warring states had to stop it. Hearing the scolding from the warring states period, everyone had thousands of doubts, but they could only shut up and leave the conference room one by one. When everyone left, the majestic warring states, as if after a great battle, had a tired look on his face. In the final analysis, the world government is still the world government of the Tianlong people. The ruler has an irreconcilable conflict with the army. In such a situation, even the warring states period does not know what to do, and can only suppress the dissatisfaction of the subordinates against the Tianlong people again and again. Looking at the huge platinum battleship slowly docked in the distance, Sengoku shook his head and sighed. He himself, why did he ever like Tianlong people? Chapter 345 Mr. Sakamoto. 2 days ago, the Navy began to gather elites from the Navy scattered around the world on a large scale. So far, more than 30,000 Navy soldiers have gathered in Marinfando, including the garrison of the Navy headquarters. The Commander-in-Chief Cyborg, who claims to miss his career in the Navy, is leaving from Marijoa to Marinfando and is expected to arrive within 7 days. The soldiers in the South China Sea stopped, and the Navy that was fighting with Lord Esters returned to the station and no longer took the initiative to attack. Lord Esters sent a letter to ask if they would continue to expand. The Whitebeard pirates sent a messenger to ask about the Big Mom pirates. What are you going to do? On the same day, the Whitebeard pirates and the major pirates began to order their pirates to prohibit them from appearing on the route of Marijoa, G5 branch, Wengwo, and Wengwo has been isolated. As of today, IWC 330 has gathered more than 7,000 fighters, but only 6 have a bounty of over 100 million, and the development momentum has been curbed due to the buildup of the Navy. In the Institute, Dr. Aolia was yesterday. Roja was sitting at the dining table, chewing his breakfast slowly, and beside him, a shadow member was reporting important recent information to him. The storm is coming, and the battle is imminent. Roja took the intelligence book and slowly turned it over. The shadow member beside him slowly left the room. Because a large number of troops have to be assembled, spanning half of the New World and the 4 Emperor-level pirates, this time the Navy did not think of a covert operation at all, and directly issued an announcement facing the world, targeting all countries established by BIGMOM. In the face of such a large-scale buildup of the Navy, it will inevitably lead to omissions in the control around the world, and many people have begun to think about it. Of course, those who have these ideas are all small forces, even trash fish. They can loot and run away, but those forces with a small scale can't do this. Otherwise, the Navy is waiting for them. Victorious return from the crusade. Yes, victory. If people in the world still had doubts about the attitude of the Navy towards the nations before, then after this announcement was issued, most of these doubts were dispelled. Without the confidence to win, how could the Navy mobilize the army like this and enter the New World? You must know that the Navy's control over the New World has been shrinking in recent years. It is conceivable that the New World is a terrifying place for the Navy. It has to be said that such a large-scale publicity crusade has indeed achieved remarkable results. Not only has BIGMOM's income progress slowed down a lot, but the prestige of the Navy and even the world government among the people has virtually recovered a little. However, Roja just chuckled and ignored it. This battle may restore some of the naval prestige, but as long as the problems of the dragons and the nobles remain unresolved, the rule of the world government will continue to be threatened. After looking through the intelligence documents for a while and issued a few orders, Roja leaned back in the chair lazily and looked at the system. It will take at least nearly a month for the Navy to complete the assembly, and it will take a long time to reach Wengwo. During this time, it is too boring to do nothing. After flipping through the system and accidentally flipping to the taskbar, Roja was surprised to find that side quest, Tentacle Monster Finish 10 Comics, bonus skill point 3, is still 1 book away. Draw another short story. Roja opened the interface of the comic lottery and began to think. Recently, he has also been promoted to 2 levels, but the unpleasant thing is that the skills given by the system are not very useful, and the degree of repetition is very high. In desperation, Roja could only pick and choose in it, and raise the search for shard enhancement and keywords to LV2. Keywords, naturally, there is no need to mention the search, but there is an additional keyword column for search, while shard enhancement increases the duration of fragments to 10 minutes on the basis of the 2nd level. For the improvement of combat ability, it is really not big. As for these several comic lottery draws, Roja also stayed. After all, Conan and Naruto have been updated all the time, and there is not much demand. But since the side quest is about to be completed, he naturally doesn't plan to stay any longer. After thinking for a while, Roja entered the keyword and immediately started the lottery. The rays of light flowed, and 3 golden lights flew out, turning into 3 comics and appearing in front of Roja. Open black lens bracket slam dunk close black lens bracket open black lens bracket insect pursuit close black lens bracket open black lens bracket whirlwind butler close black lens bracket. It's useless. Roja frowned, and put away the slam dunk as a commemorative comic, and immediately started the second lottery draw. Open black lens bracket what are you doing in Shimo Sakamoto? Close black lens bracket open black lens bracket Stonegate close black lens bracket open black lens bracket Inuyasha close black lens bracket. Boss Sakamoto. Chapter 346 What are you doing in Shimo Sakamoto? Looking at the man in the cartoon in front of him, with a fair face and black framed eyes, Roja blinked with a look of reminiscence on his face. What are you doing in Shimo Sakamoto? Was once an anime that refreshed Roja's 3 views. Roja didn't remember the exact name of the protagonist Sakamoto and what the supporting roles were called. The only thing he remembered was Sakamoto's endlessly overwhelming way of pretending to crush common sense. In Shimo Sakamoto, what are you doing? When it was just animated, the name of Sakamoto was really bloody two-dimensional. Because of his strong acting skills, he is respected by countless people. Sakamoto boss. Forcing the king. Saitama in One Punch Man drawn by Roja before, can only be defeated in terms of pretending to force. However, the power system is too low, or it should be said that there is no power system at all. Sakamoto's world is simply the world of ordinary people, and it is not helpful for Roja. Then choose Stonegate. Roja looked at the second comic. Stonegate, referred to as Stonegate, is a popular comic. Its content is about reasoning, timeline, parallel space, and the setting of the impact of time reversal on the future. At the beginning, Roja was very fascinated for a while. Different from the style of other comics, the plump and interesting characters, and the plot that is getting better, make Roja like it very much. And, in this comic, there are 2 more time machines. One of them can return his consciousness to the body in the past, but if he does something that causes the timeline to change, a parallel world may be born, and some unforeseen errors will occur. And the second one is a time machine of the usual concept, allowing people to go back directly to the past. I have to say, the second time machine is very coveted. For a while, the expression on Roja's face was tangled. And, Steins Gate. As for Inuyasha, Roja didn't think about it from the beginning. Which one should I choose? Roja looked around, entangled. After a full 10 minutes, Roja finally made a decision, reached out and pointed to the first book. In the next version, what are you doing? He really couldn't refuse the temptation to pretend. I don't need any time machine now, I will draw Stein's flash later, and I will draw later. Roja comforted himself in his heart. At the same time, Roja couldn't wait to open the comics in the system and began to read. It's been so long since I've been here, in Shimo Sakamoto, what are you doing? The plot is almost forgotten, let's see it first. A few hours later, Roja closed the system with a satisfied look and sighed. This is pretending, I'll take it. After a while, Roja also took out a pen and paper, and immediately drew on the table. For this comic, Roja does not plan to make any changes. The original book alone is enough to refresh the 3 views of people in this world. Let the boss Sakamoto teach the simple people in this world, what is pretending to be forceful. Early the next morning, as the world focused on the disputes between Marin Van Doe and the nations of the New World, Dream magazine issued a new announcement. In the next issue of Fantasy magazine, the serialization of Naruto will be cancelled and it will be sold as a single book. Instead of Naruto, a film called In Shimo Sakamoto. What are you doing? Comics. As soon as the announcement came out, it caused discussion in the world. Nine Flowers is an industry of the Dimensional Brigade. Dream magazine has already attracted the attention of the world, and under such a tense situation, Dream magazine actually launched a new comic, which cannot help but make people talk about it. What is the Dimension Brigade doing? A new comic is released at this time. I don't know if there is a war going to happen. What happened to the comics? That doesn't mean they didn't mean to get involved in this fight at all. That's right, it's not good for the Dimensional Brigade not to participate in the battle. If they are really involved, it will be a big deal. The Dimension Brigade is really strange. Such a big organization has always been selling comics. If you don't mess with them, you won't do it. It's incomprehensible. Quote. Most of the attitudes of the outside world feel that the release of new comics by the Dimensional Brigade at this time is somewhat out of place, but that does not mean that they are looking forward to new comics. No matter how fierce the war is, for the vast majority of people, it is nothing more than a conversation after dinner, and comics are really something that can make them happy. This is most obvious to the people around the Seven Waters. What are you doing in Shimo Sakamoto? This is different from the name of all the comics that Roha has ever released. As soon as it came out, it caused a lot of discussion. The unique sentence pattern, although it has a slight meaning of humility, but the strong sense of superiority in the sentence, combined with the tone, makes the speaker have an inexplicable sense of refreshment. For a time, this sentence has become a mantra for many people. What are you doing under Hawkeye? The owner of the dessert house, what are you doing? What's the matter with Frankie? The trend of forcing the king has been reflected in the title of the book. Chapter 347 Sakamoto Boss Everywhere. Half a month later, the Marine Headquarters, Marin Fando. At this time, Marine Fando was at the moment when the army was gathering wildly. On several large ports, hundreds of warships were constantly coming and going, and the densely packed naval soldiers traveled to and from Marin Fando, either carrying ammunition or deploying ships, mass training, a busy scene. Because the scale of the army gathering this time was too large and too hasty, during this time, the various military ports around Marin Fando were almost saturated, and it was even said that many warships had arrived in Marin Fando a few days ago. So far it has not officially landed. No way, this time the summoning order is for the naval branch of the whole world, and the number of ships is simply beyond imagination. In the noisy and busy port, a naval warship finally successfully entered the port and slowly docked at the edge of the port. This is a medium-sized naval warship. The number of people on board is generally not more than 300. Generally, officers above lieutenant colonel rank are the top officers. Judging from the number painted on the side of the ship, it comes from the East China Sea. Soon, the ship docked, the gangway was deployed, and a pair of naval soldiers stepped off the ship in an orderly manner, lined up neatly at the edge of the port, waiting for the relevant personnel to lead them to the temporary station. Seeing that this group of Navy soldiers had finished lining up, a neatly dressed port dispatcher came over soon. Well, let me see. You are Donghai Luoj Town, a subordinate unit. If I remember correctly, Rogue Town seems to be the jurisdiction of Colonel Wester. Where is Colonel Wester? Didn't you come with you? The port dispatcher, after determining the troop number, looked left and right, but did not see the top commander of the troop. This made the Navy in charge of dispatching a little confused. In his impression, Colonel Westa, who was in charge of Rogue Town, although he was old, had always been an old Navy who was strict with himself. It stands to reason that he should stand early, at the forefront of the team. It's not Colonel Wester who brought us here this time, but Major Smoker. A naval soldier standing in front said awkwardly. Major. The dispatcher frowned, a look of doubt appeared in his eyes. It stands to reason that in this recruitment, the elites and the highest officers of each branch will be recruited, and the second official rank will temporarily manage the branch. Why did this rogue town turn around? But the dispatcher didn't ask any more, but shook his head. Forget it, I'll take you to report. As one of only a dozen dispatchers at the port, he really didn't have the time to waste time on a major. It was not until the dispatcher took the group of troops away for more than 10 minutes, and a man with short silver hair walked down the boat of the Rogue Town branch. A natural type, smoky fruit, ability, smoker. It's all gone. Smog was smoking a thick cigar, and after a while, he walked down the gangway, looked left and right, and walked over after seeing a person who looked like a dispatcher. "Hey, may I ask, where is the report?" Smoker patted the other person's shoulder, but his eyes stayed on the other side's hair. "This guy, why is his hair so bright?" "Your Excellency, if you have any orders, you will know everything and say everything." Seeing the sailor in front of him, he turned around with a straight face, and pushed the black-rimmed glasses on his face with his index finger. Smog couldn't help but narrow his eyes. "I don't know what to put on my hair, but it's actually reflecting. And these glasses are fake, they only have frames and no lenses. I mean, where should I go to report?" Smog subconsciously ignored the other party's somewhat wrong tone and asked again. "So it is." With an exaggerated gesture, the dispatcher tidied up his straight collar, bowed his head slightly, then put his left hand on his chest, and the other pushed his glasses again. "This problem is left to the next, and the next will solve it for you in a perfect way." "I don't know if it's an illusion." Smog seems to think that the other party smiled, as if dark and cool. "I said, where should I go to report? Oh yes, I'm from." "Stop talking." The dispatcher suddenly stretched out his hand and stopped Smoker with a high tone. Seeing the palm stretched out in front of him, Smog subconsciously shrank his head back, fearing that the cigar would burn the opponent's hand. Before he could speak, the dispatcher began to speak at an extremely fast pace. "This time the summoning order has summoned the elites of the Navy from all over the world, but because the military style is different in different places, there are also great differences in behavior and habits. However, what is certain is that ordinary sailors will not dress like you, and 99% of the mid-level officers on board will follow the troops, so, you absolutely the existence of commanding a ship. But as far as I know, the people who can be captains in this summoning order are generally officers above the lieutenant colonel. And you're just a major. Isn't it right?" After speaking in one breath, the dispatcher looked directly at Smog, and he exuded a confident aura. "Yes." Smog looked at the military rank he had specially brought, and nodded speechlessly. Hearing Smoker's reply, the dispatcher's face became even more excited. "Then I'll know. The person who can make the branch chief stay behind and replace the person dispatched by himself must be a strong man with a combat power far beyond the military rank. There are absolutely not many strong people like this. Combined with your hair color, and your non-stop smoking behavior, I already know the truth. There is only one truth." The dispatcher took 2 steps back abruptly, put his left hand in his pocket, raised his right hand, and pointed at Smoker with his index. "You, Major Smoker." Smog looked at the dispatcher for a while with an idiot-looking look, and finally turned away silently. "What, have you encountered a mental illness?" Seeing that Smoker went further and further away, the dispatcher who was still posing in Conan's classic pose gradually became embarrassed. Looking left and right, and seeing that no one noticed this, the dispatcher put away his gestures and squatted down. Holding hands, he quickly took out a magazine from his arms, and muttered to himself while looking at it. "No, it shouldn't be like 0.2, shouldn't it be under my pretense? Could it be that I haven't learned the essence of Sakamoto boss? Where is the problem? I think it's cool to combine Conan's gestures and Sakamoto's movements. Why isn't Smoker responding? Could it be a matter of dressing up? Hair is definitely fine, but I spent a month's savings to buy resin essence, which is used by nobles. I see. It must be about the glasses. No lenses can reflect light. Definitely this one." Ignoring the mental illness behind him, Smoker found another person at random and patted him on the shoulder. "Hello." Turning his head, what appeared in front of Smoker was extremely neat uniform, black-rimmed glasses, tears, indifferent face. Chapter 348 Carp Who Failed to Pretend. Smog X, who was stunned by the number of psychotics in the Navy headquarters, did not know that his every move was under the watchful eyes of the highest commander Q Iota. "I remember that little It seems to be a former student of Zepha, called Smog. I heard that the strength is good. In the office of a building next to the port, Garp looked at Smog, who asked for directions everywhere. Open your mouth softly. Well, the natural smoke fruit ability, although not as good as the fruit ability of Kyabu and Akainu, but the potential is not bad. The warring states next to him replied with a dark face. Would you like to call these little guys of the new generation? If the battle situation is really like what you said, they won't be used at all. Garp trembled a few times, and his expression was a little stiff for some reason. Oh wait, it is precisely because it is a sure-win situation that I called them all. A blue vein popped out on Zongguo's forehead. Smog, Tina, Peach Rabbit, T-Dolphin, Ain, Bins. These are all hopes for the future, and only a real war can make them grow faster. Quote. Aren't you afraid of them dying there? Garp moved slightly. I'd rather let me go. I've said it all, you. Stay here. Beware. Dimensional Brigade. Sengoku's face was unprecedentedly gloomy, and his speech was even more intermittent. After barely finishing a sentence, he couldn't bear it any longer, and pointed at Garp and cursed. You old thing, there's no end to it. Get off the windowsill soon. Have you figured out what body type you are? Huh, with your body type, only a quarter of your butt can sit on the windowsill. If it weren't for your physical fitness, you wouldn't be able to sit still. That's it. Do you still want to imitate Sakamoto? Do you want to pretend? It's so ugly. Quote. Also, can you take off the umbrella on your belt? It's sunny during this time, and there can be no rain. No one dares to splash water on your head. Ordinary people can't fly with an umbrella. You're not fit to imitate Sakamoto at all. Oh. In the end, Ming. No, clear, white. The roar of the warring states echoed in the room. Wai Wei, sitting on the windowsill, with one leg bent and the other straight, Garp, wearing black-rimmed glasses, stared blankly at the warring states as if he had been scolded by the warring states for being stupid. For a while, the room was eerily quiet. Che, boring guy, I won't play with you anymore. Garp took off his glasses, threw them aside, and walked out with his nose clasped. Oh, it's really hopeless. Seeing Garp walking out, Sengoku sighed, and subconsciously pushed his glasses with his index finger, but just as he stretched out his hand, Sengoku's body froze. Looking at his Sakamoto-style finger-pushing glasses, the corner of Sengoku's mouth twitched, his face speechless. The new comics of the Dimension Brigade this time are really too magical. If those battle comics were good, many people would not be able to use the things in them. And this time the manga is different, it is completely for everyone. At first, Sengoku also felt that the actions in the comics were too exaggerated, although it was very cool to watch, but if it was actually applied, there would definitely be a strong sense of shame. However, after seeing some people change some actions a little, and after a strong sense of pretense, even the warring states period was moved. The new black-rimmed glasses on his face are the most obvious example. With his marshal taking the lead, the people below naturally became more reckless, and all kinds of actions imitating Sakamoto appeared on the soldiers of the sea, either exaggerated or natural, all kinds of strange and nonsensical pretense, which can be seen everywhere. However, what makes the warring states gratifying is that because of this cartoon and the imitations of the people, the cloud over Marin Vando seems to have been dispelled a lot, and laughter reappeared in Marin Vando. This is also the fundamental reason why the warring states period indulged various imitations of naval soldiers. I have to say that this comic by the Dimension Brigade has helped 007 warring states a lot. Originally, after the expedition declaration was issued, although there was no objection in the entire Navy, people always had resistance to war and death, especially those low-level Marines who suffered the most casualties. Since that day, a thick cloud has shrouded everyone's heart. The emergence of the new comics of the Dimension Brigade is like the dawn of breaking through the dark clouds, making everyone forget the fear of war for a short time, and can enjoy the time and happily prepare for the upcoming war. I really don't understand what you're thinking. At a time like this, a new comic is actually released. Do you really not care, or do you not care about the navy and the four emperors at all? Sengoku shook his head and sighed, looking into the distance. In the direction of the Warring States period, there is a city known as the core of the future world. City of Seven Waters. Chapter 349 The Strongest Fleet Ever. Half a month later, under the watchful eyes of the whole world, Marine Fando's navy finally assembled. And part of the information of this unprecedented huge army is also known to the world through various channels. Top combat power. Red Dog, Sakazuki, Kazuna, Pulsolino, Fujitora, smiled. In addition to this, there is also a major naval staff officer, Crane. Although not a general, but a mysterious powerhouse with general-level strength, Green Bull. The former general, the current Navy Chief Instructor, Black Wrist, Zephyr. Below this are the 12 Vice Admirals of the Navy headquarters. Over 20 Rear Admirals. And 100,000 elite naval elites from all over the world. The fleet formed by such a huge army is so powerful that it can make anyone tremble. This is the power that rules the world, the power it has. And that's not all. As soon as the army was formed, the whole world suddenly boiled. Even if they had expected it in their hearts, everyone was still taken aback by the combat power dispatched by the Navy. You must know that these are just the news that came out. In fact, the combat power dispatched by the Navy is likely to be much higher than this. There are even rumors that Garp, who is known as the strongest combat power in the Navy, has also disappeared from Marin Vando and is likely to be mixed into the fleet. This time, the people's emotions were even more excited. You must know that if ordinary people were to choose a warrior who could rival the four emperors in the Navy, 99.9% of them would choose Garp. Garp is the world's most recognized naval force. Under the watchful eyes of millions of people, the Warring States period stood at the highest point of Marin Vando and completed the final military parade. Afterwards, the fleet so large that it covered the entire sea area resolutely set off under the order of the Warring States period. Nearly 1,000 battleships of all sizes are heading towards the New World in a mighty manner. Before such a terrifying fleet, whether it was the giant sea kings that ruled the sea, or any pirates with a bounty of more than 500 million, they all fled like defeated dogs for hundreds of miles, daring not to look back. On both sides of the fleet's route, there are countless ships that have heard the news, watching the world's largest fleet. The people cheered for the strength of the Navy. The outlaws could only hide themselves in the civilian boat after seeing the fleet, which was beyond sight, and shivered. This time, they really saw the power of the Navy. At an altitude of several kilometers, Roja stood on Gilgamesh's golden boat, looking at the fleet on the sea through the clouds. It's really spectacular. Gilgamesh's voice sounded beside Roja. Yeah, it's spectacular, Roja exclaimed. A look of shock appeared in his eyes. Even in the previous life, Roja had only seen such a huge fleet in film and television, and suddenly seeing such an army appear in front of him, the shock level cannot be expressed in words. How are the preparations at BIGMOM? Roja asked without looking back, but not Gilgamesh. Soon, a voice came from the phone bug on Roja's shoulder. BIGMOM has forced conscription on the 34 islands ruled by the original, Wangguo, plus the members of the Big Mom Pirates headquarters and those who joined the new Wangguo. A total of 40,000 fighters have been assembled. The one who spoke was the shadow member who was in charge of reporting information. It's very capable, and it has gathered 40,000 people. Hearing the intelligence, Roja couldn't help but smile, but there was no expression of admiration on his face. BIGMOM's 40,000 people are simply scraping together, and it's enough. Among them, non-human races account for more than 1/3. If these people are united, they may be able to fight against the Navy with the powerful combat power of the non-human race. But how could they work so hard for BIGMOM? Where is the Big Mom Pirates now? Roja asked. They have completely abandoned the outer ports and towns and are setting up defenses in the interior of the Kingdom of Crodons. Inland. Roja raised his brows and couldn't help but nodded and smiled. In the Big Mom Pirates, there are still people who understand. If they choose to fight inland, they can avoid the firepower of thousands of naval battleships. Otherwise, just a few waves of salvos can break up the battle strength of the Big Mom pirates. Thinking silently in his heart, Roja suddenly sounded something and asked, "Where is Bigmom himself? Where is it?" The intelligence officer on the other end of the phone bug didn't speak, as if he was being questioned. After all the noise, the voice came from the other end of the phone bug. "There is a piece of information about the traces of Bigmom, but it is rather vague. According to this information, Ant seems to be at the border." Alone. Roja frowned. Alone. Chapter 350 Corpse Mountain. Corpse Mountain. Corpse Mountain. In the middle of the night shrouded the earth, and boundless black clouds covered the sky. Heavy and depressing. Under the dark clouds, the port of the Kingdom of Prudence is silent, like an empty city. As the only port town in this kingdom, there should have been 80,000 permanent residents and more than 100 ships of various sizes. Even in the middle of the night, patrols and workers could be seen. However, at this moment, there was no one walking on the street that was enough for the troika to run side by side, not even the lights. This town is already empty. The dark cloud of the war and the expulsion of the Big Mom pirates forced all the residents of this town to leave their hometown and go to an unknown place. Roja was alone, walking on the street. From time to time, he could see broken windows and messes everywhere. From these, it was not difficult to imagine how hasty the residents retreated. But that's fine too. The war is about to start, and evacuating early can also avoid the baptism of the war. At least 750 people are still alive, which is much better than the original Dressrosa. Thinking of Dressrosa, Roja couldn't help but recall the letters Violet sent every week, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Thump. Thump. Suddenly, a strange sound came from a distance, like the sound of heavy objects falling into the sea. Roja stopped and turned to look in the direction from which the voice came. In just a few seconds, there were a few more voices similar to the one just now. The direction over there is the port. It turned out to be there. Roja stepped forward and walked in the direction from which the voice came. Roja was originally wandering in the town connected to the port, so he only walked for 10 minutes and came to the port. Just walking around the corner, when Roja saw the scene in front of him, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes, and there was a dangerous light in his eyes. Corpse Mountain. A real corpse mountain. And more than one. Dozens of huge mountains of corpses were piled up on the port. Under the shrouded darkness of night, it was eerie. What made the scalp numb was that there was no blood on these corpses. There is still a strong sense of horror, as if he saw something extremely terrifying at the moment before he died. At this time, on the mountain of corpses, corpses from time to time rolled off the mountain and fell into the sea. This is exactly what Roja heard. On the other side of the corpse mountain, on the pier of the port, a huge figure was sitting on the edge of the pier, and from time to time, he reached out his hand towards the sea and threw it, as if he was throwing something. Seeing this scene, the coldness on Roja's face gradually became cold, but his eyes looked at the corpse mountain next to him. But after seeing this, Roja's cold aura dissipated a bit. Among the dozens of corpse mountains and thousands of corpses, Roja did not see the figures of ordinary people, but most of them were pirates with scars, tattoos, and hideous faces, and on some corpse mountains, there is also a broken pirate flag, as if to tell everyone that these dead pirates belong to the pirate group represented by this flag. After carefully observing the corpse mountain, Roja nodded, and the coldness on his face completely dissipated. It appears that Bigmom has not violated their deal. It is absolutely intolerable for Roja to slaughter ordinary people, but if it is a pirate who burns, kills, plunders, and commits all evils, Roja does not care about it. This garbage, the more dead the better. Thinking of this, Roja was not looking at the corpse mountain, but walked towards Bigmom in the distance. You're here. Just after taking a few steps, Bigmom turned around and looked at Roja. At this time, Roja finally saw what Bigmom threw into the sea. It was a dark and transparent soul. Roja raised his brows and already understood why Bigmom had to leave the main force and stayed here alone for so long. It seems that the Navy is going to be in big trouble. Roja looked at the deep blue sea and spoke lightly. Since we are going to fight, of course we must give them a big enough greeting. Bigmom said coldly, and immediately frowned, looking at Roja. What? Even the loss of the Navy, you want to avoid it? Of course not, I'm not confident enough to control everything. Roja shook his head, not caring about the hostility in Bigmom's tone. This war, in the final analysis, is still what Bigmom has paid the most. If she survives, she will naturally be able to enjoy her life in the future. If she dies, then naturally everything will be over. In this case, how could Roja care about Bigmom's little temper? Are you really confident that you can keep your promise? Bigmom broke the silence between the two. What do you think? Roja didn't answer, but sat next to Bigmom, waving his fingers casually towards the sea below. The weird thing is that Roja just moved his finger, and the sea below started to move irregularly, as if something invisible was manipulating the sea. Chapter 351 Big Mom, take the initiative. Looking at Roja, who was playing with the seawater with a relaxed smile on his face next to him, Bigmom's eyes fluctuated and his expression was mixed. Who would have thought that this one person was actually the culprit who stirred the world in recent years, and the cause of this war? If it weren't for Roja, she would never have gotten the wealth in Ralph Drew, let alone the position of Pirate King. If it weren't for the transaction with Roja, Bigmom's original intention should be to follow the wealth of Ralph Drew and slowly develop. When the strength is sufficient, he will call himself One Piece and start building a country. Perhaps with her ability, it is impossible for her to meet the requirements of founding a country in this life, but even if she is old and dead, she will never be able to face the current situation where she will never die with the world government. In fact, Bigmom also knows that in the final analysis, his obsession is too heavy, and he can't refuse Roja's temptation at all. But speaking of words, among the four emperors, who does not have his own obsession? Whitebeard regards family as life, and Redhead regards friendship as life. This is something everyone knows. It is also Bigmom's obsession with the nations, no weaker than the Whitebeard and red hair, that made her do what she is today. In the final analysis, Bigmom did not resist Roja's temptation. Even if she knew that Roja's pie might kill her, she resolutely ate it. Is it worth it? Bigmom couldn't help but ask himself in his heart. Just as Bigmom was contemplating, Roja's voice came from beside her. How are the people of the Kingdom of Prudence? All have been moved to a safe place. Bigmom replied subconsciously, and immediately glanced at Roja with complicated eyes. This man, until now, still attaches so much importance to the lives of ordinary people. That's good. Roja patted the dust on his body and stood up. But at this moment, the phone bug in Roja's arms suddenly rang. After taking out the phone bug and listening, Roja frowned slightly and glanced at Bigmom. What's wrong? Bigmom asked after Roja hung up the phone. The Navy has accelerated. It is expected that the Vanguard fleet will be here tomorrow morning. Roja frowned. It turned out to be this. Bigmom didn't show any panic because of the early arrival of the Navy, but stood up slightly relaxed and stretched his lazy waist. Exactly, my side is over, it's time to start. Said, Bigmom summoned Thundercloud Zeus, who had been in the dark clouds in the sky, and was about to climb up. For some reason, this huge back gives people a feeling of desolation and loneliness. Looking at the back of Bigmom, Roja suddenly had a thought in his heart, and said subconsciously, your children, don't leave some, I have a way to make them disappear in the battle. After finishing speaking, Roja shook his head and laughed at himself. What is he talking about? For Bigmom, things like children are probably not as important as desserts. But what Roha never expected was that after hearing his words, Bigmom actually stopped, turned his back to Roha and was silent for a while, and then slowly said a few names. "Let them survive," Big Mom whispered. Roha glanced at Bigmom in surprise and nodded heavily. "Good." After that, the two didn't speak again. Ellipsis 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 ellipsis. 9 flowers. Bigmom's body seemed to relax a little, and he flexibly sat on Thundercloud Zeus and flew into the distance. Her movement seemed to send out some kind of signal, and below her, the sea water suddenly fluctuated. The waves were turbulent, and the waves that had been slapping towards the port actually began to flow against the current. However, the mutation is far more than that. Under Roha's gaze, the sea area with a radius of 100 miles began to fluctuate at the same time. The sea surface is rolling, huge waves are rising, and undercurrents are surging. I don't know how many tons of seawater, with the movement of Bigmom, began to move. The dull and loud sound of the impact of the waves on the seabed, connected into one piece, trembled for hundreds of miles. The whole sea is moving. Ha ha ha, kids, get up. Get up. Follow mom. Go clean up those bastards. Bigmom's high laughter resounded throughout the sea. Following her call, on the sea below, a bulge composed entirely of seawater suddenly rose up one by one, and there were hundreds of them as far as the eye could see. That is the power of soul absorbed by Bigmom in the past month, mobilizing the power of all nations and slaughtering nearly 100 pirate groups. She casts these souls into the sea, endows the sea with spiritual knowledge, so that they can act according to Bigmom's intentions. And now, it's time for them to show their power. Hundreds of huge water masses, with the rapid advancement of Bigmom, constantly drive the surrounding seawater, and countless sea waters continue to touch and merge on the way to form a larger collective, stirring the entire sea area. It can be seen to the naked eye that a huge water curtain is formed under the feet of Bigmom, getting longer and higher, and within a few minutes, it has become one of the strongest natural disasters in the world. Great Tsunami. Chapter 352 Crisis. Will the Navy be wiped out? Dawn comes, and the sun rises slowly. Above the sea, the boundless fleet is heading towards the kingdom of Prudence. There, an unprecedented war awaits them. On a battleship at the core of the fleet in front, two men wearing navy cloaks and exuding a powerful momentum stood side by side, looking at the sea in the distance. All the sailors who passed by behind them would subconsciously slow down their steps and look at these two people with adoring eyes, as if just looking at their backs, the nervousness in their hearts about the upcoming war would dissipate invisibly. There is no other reason, just because these two people are strong enough. It is so strong that it can even be stronger than the combination of more than 100 battleships of the Pioneer Army. This is your purpose, to improve morale. Sakazuki listened to the whispers behind him, and looked at the excited expressions of the Shanghai soldiers on both sides of the battleship. His tone was flat, but his posture was indeed more and more tall, and his body exuded at the same time, the momentum increased a little. Anyway, I am idle, and the effect is not very good. Fujitora, who was beside him, said with a smile. A gentle smile appeared on Fujitora's face when he sensed Sakazuki's deliberately raised aura next to him. Although he is blind, he is still aware of new terms that have recently appeared in the world. Sakazuki's current behavior seems to be called arrogant. Why do you always feel that you are thinking of something strange? Sakazuki looked at the weird smile on Fujitora's face and frowned. Illusion, it's all your illusion. Fujitora denied it with a smile, but in the next second, the smile on Fujitora's face disappeared. The momentum that had been slightly overflowing suddenly shrank, and the next moment, an invisible ripple suddenly spread out from Fujitora's body, pointing directly to the sea area ahead. What's wrong? Sakazuki asked with a frown. With his strength, it is natural to feel that Fujitora used a sense of domineering just now, but what is it that is worth Fujitora's gaffe? Subconsciously, Sakaski's body also spread out a wave of domineering, and followed the direction of Fujitora's perception, chasing the past. However, until Sakaski's arrogance reached the limit, he did not perceive any changes. Looking at Fujitora, whose expression was still solemn, Sakaski couldn't help showing a look of seriousness on his face. The promotion of Fujitora and Green Bull was directly in charge of Martial Sengoku and 5 old stars because of the inside story and various tests involved. Even Sakaski didn't know how strong Fujitora was. However, just relying on this domineering knowledge far surpassed him. It was enough to make Sakaski look at Fujitora with admiration. Looking at Fujitora next to him, Sakaski was not too anxious. The main fleet was less than an hour's voyage behind them. If the Big Mom pirates really took the initiative to attack, there was no need to wait for the main fleet to arrive. It is the Yellow Monkey, Green Cow, Crane and others behind him, who can come in a few minutes. But it didn't take long for Sakaski to see the face of Fujitora beside him suddenly gloomy. Before Sakaski could ask, Fujitora opened his eyes with a look of astonishment on his face. Turn around. No, it's too late. Order all ships to drop their anchors. Quick! Fujitora shouted hastily. Seeing Fujitora so nervous, Sakaski's face suddenly froze, and without asking, he quickly grabbed a sailor behind him. The order goes on. The whole army is anchored and stands by. Inform the rear fleet to stop moving forward. Fujitora added beside him. This time, even Sakaski was stunned for a moment. The rear fleet stopped. The pioneer army had only 100 warships, and all of them were fast ships. No matter if they broke down or rerun, it would not take much time. But the rear fleet. There are more than 900 warships, many of which are super heavy firepower ships. If they break down and stop, they will not be able to guarantee the formation of the formation within a few hours. Pass on my order first, and let's talk about the rear fleet. Sakaski waved at the sailor, motioning him to pass the order. At this time, Fujitora also reacted and did not stop. What happened? Sakaski asked. Tsunami. I sensed a tsunami with a height of at least 50 meters and a length of more than 60 kilometers, which is coming this way. Fujitora said in a deep voice, with an unprecedented dignified expression. Tsunami. Sakaski's pupils shrank, and he instantly recalled information about BIGMOM's abilities. Did BIGMOM do it? It is estimated that I sensed a very strong momentum above the tsunami, stronger than you and me. Fujitora nodded slowly. 50 meters high and 60 kilometers long. Sakaski looked anxiously into the distance, his heart pounding. Such a huge tsunami, if it is really allowed to move forward, the small battleships of the vanguard army will probably be wiped out, and even the main fleet behind it will suffer extremely heavy losses, with tens of thousands of casualties and injuries. It is a sure thing. We can only see if we can organize it before it comes over. Fujitora said from the side. This tsunami is estimated to be under the control of BIGMOM. If it can repel BIGMOM, or kill the ocean spirit that drives the tsunami body, maybe it can break him. Quote. That's all. Sakaski nodded in agreement, and immediately took out the phone bug in his arms. Sakaski, what's the matter? Came the crane's voice from the other end of the phone bug. Something happened ahead. Sakaski used the fastest and most concise words to repeat the current situation. After speaking, the other end of the phone worm fell silent, and after a few seconds, the crane's voice came again. You go first, we'll be there later. Got it. Sakaski nodded, and immediately hung up the phone bug. After briefly explaining a few things, and handing over the command to a lieutenant general of the Navy headquarters, Fujitora manipulated gravity, controlled the 2 lifeboats, and took Sakaski to the distance at high speed. 10 minutes later, a thin white line appeared on the sea level in the sight of the 2 of them. Although the size of the tsunami could not be clearly seen, the thunderous roar had entered the ears of the 2 of them. What stopped them was an unprecedented tsunami, and 4 Emperors BIGMOM. Perceiving the devastating tsunami ahead, Akainu thought of a person for no reason. Although there have been countless disputes with the other party, the ability of that person is the best solution now. Aoki, you bastard, where did you go? Chapter 353 Meteorite. Under the sky, above the blue sea. The rolling waves hit, and the roar of tens of millions of tons of seawater slapped, shaking the world. How to stop it? Akainu looked at the tsunami in the distance, frowning, and a strong sense of powerlessness rose in his heart. Only when we really face natural disasters can we feel the insignificance of human beings and the absolute power of nature. Although the natural disaster in front of her was only done by BIGMOM alone, after her long savings, it was no less than a real natural disaster. In just 10 minutes, the tsunami manipulated by BIGMOM was more than 100 kilometers long, and its height was rising steadily, and it was about to approach 80 meters. It is 100 kilometers long and 80 meters high. Although it sounds like a string of data, only those who are really close to the goal can feel despair. Looking around, as far as the eyes can see, there are all tsunamis as tall as mountains, and there is no edge on both sides. Even if Akainu is much taller than ordinary people, if he is standing in the '08 tsunami, in comparison, I am afraid that an ant is not much bigger. How do you know if you don't try? Fujitora next to him took a few steps forward. Although there was no expression on his face, Akainu could still feel Fujitora's determination. Even if you spend your life, you must fight for a chance for the fleet behind you. Along with Fujitora's advance, a boundless force bloomed from his body. The surrounding sea suddenly fluctuated, turning into layers of ripples that spread to the distance. The next moment, Fujitora suddenly drew his sword, and layers of purple halo reached the sky. Then, the knife is sheathed. Nothing happened. Mist. BIGMOM, who was standing above the thundercloud in the distance, raised his brows and showed sarcasm. As early as the moment Akainu and Fujitora appeared, BIGMOM had already discovered them, but she did not take them seriously. Even if Fujitora and Akainu are two generals, even if the other is a strong man who can destroy a country by one person, it is too late now. Maybe they could be stopped by Fujitora when the tsunami was in place, but after a few hours of traveling, the tsunami has turned into a real natural disaster. Tens of millions of tons of seawater are continuously involved and merged by the tsunami on the way forward, and become part of the tsunami. As the tsunami moves forward, it attracts more seawater on the way. To now, even BIGMOM herself can't control such a huge tsunami. What she has done is to continuously add power to the tsunami and make the tsunami bigger by using a large number of seawater activators that she manipulates. Power is stronger. Naval fleet. A surefire situation. I want to see what the Navy can do to smash my nations. Standing above the thundercloud, BIGMOM laughed out loud, and the high laughter resounded through the sky. That's right, from the beginning, BIGMOM didn't plan to follow the deal with Roha. The transaction with Roha is stable, but it requires BIGMOM to get the final result at the expense of discarding the entire Big Mom pirates and her newly established nations. But if she directly smashed the crusade of the Navy, what else needs to be abandoned? She can continue to control the world on the premise of completing the transaction. Take control of the Big Mom pirates. Thinking of the naval fleet that came to attack him, lost most of it under the huge tsunami, and fled like a bereaved dog, the joy in BIGMOM's heart almost overflowed. As for the deal with Roha, oh, did she not violate it? It went completely according to Roha's plan. The result was somewhat different from what Roha expected. BIGMOM wanted to laugh a little when the shriveled appearance of the man who had always been full of confidence appeared in his mind. It's so cool. Scoff. Suddenly, a harsh screeching sound interrupted BIGMOM's snickering. What sound? Heaven. BIGMOM subconsciously looked up at the sky. Next second, BIGMOM's pupils shrank and exclaimed, "Meteorite. How is that possible?" It can be seen to the naked eye that there is a huge meteorite with a raging fire burning on its surface, and it is falling rapidly towards the top of BIGMOM's head. Although it is impossible to estimate the size of the meteorite, the sound of the air tearing apart is enough to make anyone terrified. Seeing the meteorite flying in his direction, even BIGMOM couldn't keep his composure and stepped on the thundercloud below. Leon Zestin shrank for a while, and then flashed into the distance with tears in his eyes. A few seconds later, the huge meteorite almost wiped the corner of BIGMOM's clothes and smashed into the tsunami below. Boom! The earth-shattering explosion sounded, and thousands of water splashes shot out. It can be seen to the naked eye that the core part of the tsunami, centered on the place where the meteorite smashed, was actually smashed by it. Success! Sakazuki exclaimed subconsciously with a smile on his face. However, the next moment, Sakazuki's smile froze on his face. The fault of the tsunami has actually begun to recover. Chapter 354 Sakazuki's Decision. In less than 2 seconds before and after, the cavity smashed by the meteorite had already disappeared. Sakazuki frowned. Although the momentum of the tsunami is extremely strong, even if it is punched out, the seawater on both sides will fall to make up for it, and the rear will advance to fill up, but the 100-meter fault cannot be made up so quickly. What happened? It's BIGMOM, she is manipulating the things in the seawater to make up for the gap. Fujitora, who was beside him, saw Sakazuki's doubts and explained. With a strong perception and a domineering appearance, he can fully detect the depths of the tsunami, and naturally find the seawater that has been invigorated by BIGMOM. What's in the sea? Extract other people's souls and give life to dead things. Akainu reacted instantly and understood the key, that is to say, you must defeat BIGMOM, or pull out and kill everything in the sea before you can stop the tsunami. That's right, other than completely defeating the tsunami and making it unable to heal, there is only this way. Fujitora nodded solemnly. For a while, the two of them were inevitably a little depressed. Beat BIGMOM. The two of them are fighting to the death and may be able to defeat BIGMOM, but there is simply not enough time. If you want to defeat the 4 emperors, it will be impossible within a few hours. By then, the tsunami would have drowned the fleet. Moreover, this is still under the condition that BIGMOM will never retreat. If the powerhouse of the 4 emperors level, if he runs away with all his heart, let alone 2 generals, even if the 3 generals go together, they may not be able to keep each other. This is also one of the important reasons why the world government has been reluctant to move the 4 emperor pirates. If the 4 emperors' pirates cannot be wiped out in one go, then the world government will face the crazy revenge of the 4 emperors. Imagine, with the destructive power of the 4 emperor-level powerhouses, when they gave up their face, abandoned their station, and began to travel around the world, specifically looking for trouble with the world government, what kind of scene would that be like? It is not an exaggeration to say that it is a disaster. Go to a general, but you can't beat it. If you go to 2 or 3 generals, you won't be able to keep it. Send out Garp and the like. Not to mention whether they can keep it or not, if they don't kill the opponent on the spot, or simply don't block it, the 4 emperor-level powerhouses can directly hit the weak defensive Marin Fando. The once Golden Lion is the most classic example. If it weren't for the fact that Karp and Warring States happen to be in Marin Vando, otherwise, I am afraid that there is no such place as Marin Vando now. From these, it is not difficult to see that the deterrent power of the 4 emperors, and the pressure of the 2 of Sakazuki at this time. In other words, we can only kill all the souls in the tsunami first, and then defeat the tsunami. Sakazuki said in a low voice. That's the only way. Be careful to avoid BIGMOM. The most important thing is to defeat the tsunami. Fujitora beside him reminded softly. Of course. Sakazuki nodded, and on his shoulders, the lava was scorching and churning endlessly. Then let's start. Fujitora walked forward with a calm expression, and when the voice fell, his figure had disappeared in place. Red Dog. Fujitora. joining forces for the first time. At this time, among the clouds 5 kilometers away from the tsunami, a man in a black trench coat was standing above the sky, looking at the battle in the distance. It was Roha who followed Bigmom and came to watch. Fujitora and Sakaski, I didn't expect to see these two team up. Roha had a faint smile on his face, and a golden light flashed away in his eyes. Fujitora and Sakaski, although they both insist on justice, but in completely different ways, and their personalities are completely opposite. It is rare to see the two of them work together against each other, and of course Roha will not miss it. At this time, the sea was full of flaming lava and criss-crossing purple ons. Countless lava tumbled under Sakaski's feet, and under the erosion of seawater, a small piece of suspended land was formed. And he was standing on this piece of land, and in his fists, he kept shooting huge lava fireballs, like a powerful cannonball, bombarding the waves. Often a few punches can take away one hidden in the animated soul in the tsunami. And in front of him is Fujitora floating in the air. Different from Sakaski's astonishing attack, every time Fujitora made a shot, the effect was very strange. I saw him constantly moving above the sea, waving the blade in his hand from time to time. Every time the blade is swung, the surrounding sea area will undergo special changes. Or a 100-meter-long depression appeared out of thin air, or hundreds of tons of seawater broke out of the sea out of thin air, and then slammed down, with an amazing momentum. Such a wide-ranging attack, coupled with Fujitora's powerful sense of domineering, made him do far more damage to the activated soul in the sea than Sakaski. However, the most damage to the activated seawater in the tsunami is the meteorite that occasionally falls from the sky. Although it takes a long time for a meteorite to fall, the fall of each meteorite often creates a huge hole on the huge waves of the tsunami. In order to make up for these holes, Bigmom could only mobilize the soul body in the tsunami, staring at the attacks of Sakaski and Fujitora, and went to mend it. Two bastards. Seeing the souls hidden in the waves die one by one, Bigmom could no longer bear it, and resolutely manipulated Thundercloud Zeus to launch an attack. Thunder. The thick thunder column, flashing with electric light, slashed down into the sky, until Fujitora. At the same time as the thunder struck, Bigmom picked up the big sword and slashed towards Sakaski with a volley. Giant martial arts. Elbaf's gun, powerful country. A huge sword energy the size of a battleship pierced through the air and slashed towards Sakaski from top to bottom. The beginning of the battle, Bigmom showed his might as the four emperors and attacked two generals at the same time. Crack. Boom. In the face of the thunder that fell from the sky, Fujitora did not dodge or evade, and faced him with a knife. On the other side, Sakaski was not so calm. Facing the giant sword energy, he stepped on the temporary land. Although he also defended against Bigmom's attack, the land under his feet shattered instantly. Jumped on top of the fragments in the distance, and did not end up falling into the sea. Is at an absolute disadvantage in the face of Bigmom on the sea. Although the two defended against Bigmom's attack, Bigmom did not intend to stop. Fire crit. On fire. Thunder. Elbaf's gun, powerful country. Flamethrower. Great waves. Heavy and powerful attacks, like torrential rain, kept attacking the two of Sakaski. Damn it, if it goes on like this, it's over. Sakaski continued to create pieces of suspended land above the sea, tired of dealing with Bigmom's attack, and was restless in his heart. At this moment, even Fujitora, who had always been indifferent, had a hint of anxiety on his face. Under such a fierce attack, Sakaski and Fujitora had no spare energy to attack the soul in the tsunami, and could only watch the tsunami continue to advance and get bigger and bigger. In just a few minutes, the damage they just caused has been completely made up and disappeared. Moreover, since the battle, they have retreated nearly 10 kilometers in a row. At the current speed of the tsunami, they will be photographed on the head of the vanguard fleet in at most 15 minutes. By then, It's all over. Damn. After Sakazuki once again resisted Bigmom's attack, there was inevitably a hint of grayness on his face. So far, how to stop the tsunami and save the vanguard behind him? Is it? Do you want him to be buried in the bottom of the sea without seeing nearly 10,000 Navy elites, without even seeing the face of the enemy? No way. A resolute look appeared on Sakazuki's resolute face, and there was a desire to die in his eyes. Fujitora, grab me, lean over, Sakazuki shouted at Fujitora in the distance. What? Fujitora turned his head in confusion, and when he sensed the momentum on Sakazuki's body, he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. This momentary pause caused the movement of his hands to stop for a moment, and he was accidentally wiped by Bigmom's attack, taking away a large piece of flesh and blood. But even so, Fujitora did not snort, but flew towards Sakazuki silently. Needless to say, Fujitora had already sensed Sakazuki's intentions from Sakazuki's aura. Resolute, tragic, dead, crazy. Sakazuki will use himself as a shield to fend off attacks for Fujitora. I blocked her. You destroy the tsunami. Sakazuki shouted loudly, and Fujitora beside him sighed silently, then nodded. Good. Chapter 355 Sad. Death. Above the sky, looking at the war in the distance, seeing Sakazuki's movement, the expression on Roha's face gradually disappeared, replaced by a respectful look. Regardless of camp or belief, his solemnity is just a respect for a soldier. Sakazuki, you are indeed a real navy. Roha murmured in a low voice. The battle situation in the distance began to change. With Sakazuki blocking the attack, Fujitora gradually began to clear the soul body in the tsunami and destroy the tsunami. However, Sakazuki, who was beside him, was covered in blood and bruised. No matter how Bigmom's strength ranks among the four emperors, she is always a true four emperors. In the face of this level of existence, passively beaten, even if it is stronger than Sakazuki, it will not last long. Mention that because of his elementalization, Bigmom's attacks are either domineering or all kinds of elementalized attacks aimed at him, and the tricks are deadly, making Sakazuki too tired to deal with it. Even Sakazuki, who was beside him, couldn't hold on for long. Fujitora's movements became more and more eager, the long knife in his hand kept waving, and the meteorite's falling speed more than doubled 947. However, after a few minutes, Fujitora suddenly held his breath and looked beside him in horror. Sakazuki, you. In Fujitora's perception, Sakazuki's momentum actually began to decline rapidly. How could he not know? What does this mean? Don't. Cough. Don't. Worry about me. Continue. I'll teach you. Continue. With his back to Fujitora, Sakazuki was covered in blood at this time. Scarlet blood flowed from all over his body, and even said that it had blocked his sight. The dark red suit that was straight and neat in the past had long since been broken. It was tattered, the blood and the cloth were fused together, and the color became deeper and deeper, and the hat he had always worn on his head had already been lost in the battle and disappeared. Admiral, Akainu, Sakazuki, it's the limit. You. Continue. I still can do it. Sakazuki spoke with difficulty. The blood spilling from his mouth made his words a little unclear, but the movements of his hands were more fluent than his words. The red lava that was burning with raging fire continued to face the attack of Bigmom, and the scarlet blood scattered, constantly touching the lava, turning into a faint blood mist. Are you reaching the limit? Sakazuki's vision gradually blurred, and his eyes were full of blood. For some reason, at this dying moment, Sakazuki's thoughts gradually drifted away. Cap's hearty sighs, Sengoku's helpless sigh, Aokiji's dispute with him, Kizaru's laziness, and a Navy soldier looked at him admiringly and called out, Admiral Sakazuki. Countless people surrounded him, calling out the name of the Navy. Finally, set the frame on that side, in the hunting wind, the flag fluttering in the wind. Navy flag. Also, the boundless golden streamer. Okay. Golden. Streamer. The massive blood loss made Sakaski's response a little sluggish. Before he could react, a loud shout was passed into his ears. 8-foot Changu Jade. Boom boom boom. The boundless golden streamer, like an army salvo, swept across BIGMOM, covering a space of 100 meters around her, making bursts of roaring sounds. Its might was so powerful that it forced BIGMOM to keep dodging. Kazuna. Hearing this voice, Fujitora turned his head in surprise, just in time to see the figure standing above the sky in the distance. The yellow suit, the navy cloak, the golden glow, the brilliance. It was the yellow ape who came. Beneath him, a figure exuding a powerful momentum, stood side by side, constantly issuing powerful and terrifying attacks, slashing towards the tsunami, and slamming into BIGMOM. Yellow ape, green cow, crane, Zephyr. There are also dozens of generals with straight bodies beside them. Navy reinforcements finally arrived. Occupy an instant twist. BIGMOM is still a step behind. Roha, standing above the clouds, watched Fujitora with Sakaski, rushing towards the rear vanguard, and shook his head involuntarily. BIGMOM has paid a lot for this attack. Just to investigate the distribution of the naval fleet and the high-end strength of the vanguard, they have paid no less than 10 spies who have been hiding for many years. It is precisely because she knows the vanguard fleet that there are only 2 generals, and she resolutely consumes tens of thousands of souls and launches this tsunami, just to annihilate the living force of the navy. However, despite all the calculations, she still did not take into account the people's hearts, and did not expect that Sakaski was willing to risk his own life for the sailors of the vanguard fleet. So that, it was dragged on for so long. Fall short. Roha pouted a little boringly, and there is no suspense in the next battle. Sure enough, in the face of the sudden appearance of a large number of reinforcements from the navy, BIGMOM did not dare to stay any longer. After mobilizing its ability, she started to withdraw after launching a wave of attacks. On the other side, the strong men of the navy did not choose to pursue, but began to destroy the tsunami. Facing the attacks of many strong men, the soul body within the tsunami began to dissipate at a speed visible to the naked eye. And this trend, after Fujitora returned, increased again. It was only a few minutes, and Roha could no longer perceive that there was any soul body in the tsunami. The next thing is very simple. The powerhouses began to plan to destroy the tsunami, separate the forces of the tsunami forward, buy time for the vanguard fleet, and avoid losses. When the tsunami finally arrived at the vanguard fleet, the volume had shrunk by more than half. Although it still caused great damage to the vanguard fleet, it was much better than the original situation where the entire army was wiped out. The Battle of the Kingdom of Prudence, in a gesture that no one thought of, officially started. Chapter 356 Back the Blame. Above the sky, the clouds are densely covered, and the thunder is bursting. The Kingdom of Prudence, the port town, has been shrouded in the smoke of artillery fire. Several warships appeared in a half-moon, firmly surrounding the port and port towns, and desperately venting artillery fire into the towns. Nearly 1,000 naval guns fired in salvos, and their momentum was so huge that it even overshadowed the thunder overhead, forming a near-substantial impact and disrupting the entire sea area. In the distance, the seaport towns that were enough for more than 100,000 people to live in had already been destroyed. It was smashed into pieces, and there were many broken walls. Even under some building wrecks, scarlet viscous blood could be seen flowing out of the gaps. Those were assassins hired by BIGMOM from the Dark World, as well as some warriors of all nations. Exception, they are all murderers who are proficient in assassination techniques, specializing in ambush and traps, and the task given to them by BIGMOM is also very simple. Everyone can evacuate as long as they kill 10 navies, and then they can get enough from her hands. They're dashing lifelong wealth. In addition, every time one kills one more person, the wealth increases by 1/10. Under the heavy reward, there must be brave men. These slayers in the dark have already ambushed in the town early, scattered into this huge seaport town, and laid deadly traps. Colorless and odorless poisonous mist, serial explosives, blowing needles in the shadows, and blades falling from the roof. Although the number of assassins in this group was less than 500, they let the first 10,000 Navy to land, with more than 3,000 casualties. In the face of such a huge loss, the Navy made a decisive decision and dispatched generals and colonels to start the sweep, and even more powerful men who were proficient in seeing, hearing, and domineering wandered around. However, among the assassins, there were also some masters who were proficient in the art of restraining breath. With their greed for wealth and the danger of being discovered and killed by the strong, they still attacked and killed one navy after another. Finally, after more than 3,000 soldiers died and more than 5,000 were injured in the early landing, the Navy stopped the continued landing, and ordered the Navy soldiers who had penetrated into the town to retreat to the coastal area. It's not that the Navy can't beat it, but it's not worth it, they have a better solution. Just when the assassins were confused by the sudden withdrawal of the Navy, the earth-shattering roar suddenly came from a distance, and then a harsh scream sounded, densely packed, with nearly 1,000 shells, crashing into the town. The violent explosion even made the whole town tremble. Nearly 30 assassins were blown to pieces on the spot. The Navy started saturation bombing. They are going to destroy the whole town. Kai. It was only at this time that the assassins realized that they were not participating in the usual assassination, let alone the Battle of the Pirates, but a real war. However, it was too late for them to understand, and before they could leave the place where they were ambushed, the boundless shells that covered the sky had already fallen from the sky, bursting with deadly fire. Boom, boom, boom. The roar of the distant town continued, and Fujitora stood on the bow, silently sensing the town under the baptism of artillery fire. At this moment, there was a sudden sound of gentle footsteps behind him, walking towards Fujitora. Has it been confirmed that there are no ordinary residents in the town? Fujitora asked without looking back. The first time I landed, I didn't find it. Tsuru, who walked to Fujitora's side, said lightly. Hearing this, Fujitora couldn't help frowning. A look of disgust appeared on his face, but he didn't say anything. On the first landing, the Navy explored at most 1/3 of the town and found no ordinary residents, which does not mean that the latter 2/3, nor ordinary residents. That is to say, it is very likely that there are people who were reluctant to leave their homes and died in this attack. But this is the true face of war. In order to win, trade-offs must be made. Ellipsis 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 ellipsis. 9 flowers. Even the Navy that insists on justice is no exception. Landing from here is the fastest and safest shortcut to go to the King City of Provence and start a decisive battle as soon as possible. The rest of the directions are either vast forests or rugged hills. If you go to the royal city from those places, the situation facing the Navy will be even more cruel. Therefore, the Navy chose this seaport as a breakthrough. Of course, the Navy can actually send a large number of strong men into the city to clear it up, but then, what a waste of time. In the war against time, every minute wasted, the situation of the battle will have an unknown change. The Navy can't afford to gamble. Among the lives of a very small number of ordinary people and the lives of thousands or even tens of thousands of navies, everyone chose the latter. This is also the reason why Fujitora is unhappy. Although he really wants to save everyone, the general trend is such that even he has to give in. I'll go back to the cabin to rest for a while, and call me when I'm ready to land. After Fujitora said a word, he turned and left. Crane behind him glanced at Fujitora's back and smiled helplessly. Crane knew that although Fujitora didn't say it, he actually had some complaints about her decision. Because, the artillery bombing this time, it was she who decided against all opinions. Originally, it was better for Sakazuki to mention this kind of thing, but Sakazuki is still recovering from the battleship in the rear, and she can only be an old woman who is about to retire to bear the infamy in the future. Warring states, this year's Navy is much stronger than we were at the beginning. Hiyao looked at the city under the fire in his old eyes, his eyes were firm and unshakable. If she can pave a clear road for the Navy and save the world government from danger, what if she, an old woman, bears countless infamy? For the justice in her heart, she has no regrets. Chapter 357 Tsunami followed by thunderstorm. The bombing that shook the entire island stopped after more than 10 minutes. There is no other reason, just because the town in front of him has completely disappeared. Only the broken bricks and tiles everywhere can prove that this place was once a prosperous town. Login. From one command ship, there was a high-pitched shout from the messenger. Soon, the battleships that surrounded the entire harbor began to dock in batches, and countless sailors hurried off the battleships and began to line up on the coast and set up temporary defense lines. Because there were so many sailors in the fleet, and they all belonged to different units, it took several hours before all the 100,000 sailors landed, barely lining up in a neat formation. Why didn't the people from all countries come? Zephyr frowned and looked into the distance, his expression solemn and doubtful. When they landed, it was the most chaotic time for the Navy. With the previous BIGMOM's combat style, it was really unreasonable that no one was sent to attack. Not necessarily tilde maybe those guys don't understand this at all. They might think it's a pirate fight. Kizaru said lazily beside him. Hearing this, there was a burst of laughter around, and several people began to whisper, their words full of contempt for BIGMOM. Pirates build a country, it sounds very cool, but in their opinion, a group of pirates who can only burn, kill, and plunder, and want to rule a kingdom, is simply a big joke. Do they know what a country is? Do you know how to govern a country? The fight between the pirates and the pirates is called battle, and the fight between countries is called war. BIGMOM didn't raid when the Navy landed, which seemed normal to them. Y7U9OVB. In the eyes of the vast majority of navies, no matter how powerful a pirate is, in terms of war, they are laymen. Surrounding Navy towards BIGMOM, Fujitora frowned slightly and looked up at the sky. Maybe it's because of that. When they heard Fujitora speak, everyone was stunned for a moment, and then followed Fujitora's gaze. However, nothing was seen except the boundless dark clouds. Nothing. What is Fujitora-sama talking about? That's it. What else is there other than dark clouds and lightning? It's impossible to be above the dark clouds, so you shouldn't be struck to death by lightning. Hey, don't talk about it, it's a bit strange. The dark cloud above has been thundering for a long time, but there is no sign of rain at all. Instead, the thunder is more and more frequent. Unlike the sailors who were whispering, the powerhouses standing around Fujitoro knew that Fujitora's arrogance was stronger than anyone present, and they would never speak nonsense. Staring at the dark clouds in the sky for a while, a light flashed in Crane's mind, and his brows instantly wrinkled. Fujitora, you don't want to say that this dark cloud covering dozens of miles around is the ability of BIGMOM? Crane asked in a low voice, but he expected Fujitora to deny his guess. However, Fujitora still nodded. You have seen the tsunami created by BIGMOM before, and it is not surprising to create a dark cloud full of thunderstorms. Thunderstorm. Cloudy. Hearing what Fujitora said, the faces of the surrounding powerhouses suddenly became serious. In terms of large-scale lethality, thunderstorms are definitely far inferior to the previous tsunami, but in terms of single-unit lethality, the two are not comparable at all. That is to say, this time BIGMOM's attack will cause fatal damage to the backbone of the Navy, the school level and even some general-level officers. Seeing the solemn gazes of his companions, Fujitora suddenly chuckled and said, "Don't worry everyone, since BIGMOM hasn't started attacking yet, there are only two possibilities. One is that she must be within a certain range before she can attack, ensuring lethality, and the second one is the one I prefer. Quote, she's still gathering strength, and the thundercloud over our heads is only half finished. Then what are you waiting for? Set off immediately. I can't let her continue." Zephyr said immediately. "Yes, leave immediately." Crane nodded, then looked around. "On the way to march, please be careful of the enemy's ambush." Definitely. No problem. Should be. Everyone responded, and immediately dispersed, and began to command the army to advance. After 2 losses, the original 100,000 Navy elites had been reduced to less than 90,000 soldiers by the time of the second landing. But even so, when the army of 90,000 people moved, it still trembled the ground beneath its feet, and its momentum was amazing. The boundless navy began to march towards the king city of Protons. There, a real bloody battle awaits them. There are 2 updates today. Think about the next plot, and recommend a friend's new book, The Rise of the Fantasy Human Race. Thank you. Chapter 358, 50,000 vs 90,000. War. Some people like it, some people fear it, but I still don't like seeing this kind of thing. Rojas sat on the edge of the golden boat, with a cloud of endless thunder flashing under his feet, and a floating projection screen in front of him. The screen is divided into 2 parts. On the left is the scene in the king city of Protons, where BIGMOM's soldiers are waiting in battle, while BIGMOM is sitting on the highest part of the royal city, with his eyes closed, surrounded by dark souls, and he doesn't know what to do. On the right side of the screen, the boundless navy was divided into dozens of battle formations, marching towards the royal city. According to their current route, they would surround the royal city on 3 sides in an hour. The mastermind who started the war is actually saying he hates war. Gilgamesh folded his arms behind his chest and opened his mouth with a chuckle. Although his words were inappropriate, his tone was sarcastic. After getting along to this day, Gilgamesh has long recognized Rojas' status, and has also figured out Rojas' temper, so he will make some jokes that he thinks are interesting. You guy, you really can't speak. Rojas smiled helplessly and shook his head. Oh wait, although this war started because of me, I can also guarantee that this will be the penultimate battle in this world. War. When the next war is over, there will be true peace in this world. Peace under your rule. Gilgamesh twitched the corners of his mouth. As long as peace is not enough. Rojas smiled faintly. Then I'm really looking forward to that day. Don't expect it, it's not far away. Rojas looked up at the screen in front of him, and there was a faint expectation between his eyebrows. The waiting time always passed slowly, until Rojas took out a bottle of red wine and drank it with Gilgamesh, and the picture on the screen in front of him finally merged. The naval battle formation is approaching the royal city. Outside the king city of Protons, there is an endless naval battle formation. At a glance, whether it is in the hills, in the jungle, or in the wilderness, there are soldiers in blue and white uniforms walking out silently, marching neatly. The queue is approaching the king city. The number of people reached the level of 10,000 people, and there were already many mountains and fields, not to mention the number of navy at this time. There were nearly 90,000 people. For the first time seeing such a large number of enemies, in the king city of Protons, the warriors of the nations could not help but feel a heavy sense of depression in their hearts. This is only the first time they have participated in the war, and they have never seen the sight of enemy troops everywhere. Why are there so many people? How can this be fought? Isn't it that there are less than 90,000 people left? But why do I think there are at least hundreds of thousands of people on the other side? Is there a mistake in the information? Why are there still a steady stream of people coming out of the jungle? Don't panic, the information can't be wrong. They have 90,000 people, and we have 50,000 people. Don't forget we still have the city wall to support. The panic spread throughout the royal city, and the defenders on the city walls reacted the most strongly. Although there was a captain-level presence who kept rectifying the order, the effect was really negligible. On the platform at the top of the royal palace, BIGMOM sat cross-legged on the ground, with Katakuri standing beside her. After hearing the report from the messenger, Katakuri's face turned gloomy. The mentality of the pirates and the regular army in this situation is completely different. If this continues, the navy may not need to attack. Just stand outside the range of the Wangcheng artillery for a while, and the defenders will be able to run away. Mom, what should I do? Katakuri bent down and whispered to BIGMOM with his eyes closed beside him. However, no response was received. Katakuri frowned, but still didn't speak. Instead, he informed the messengers on his own and issued a series of measures, either threatening or rewarding, with the intention of maintaining morale. Although the method of rewarding and punishing did not completely restore morale, it was still somewhat effective. After hearing the report from the front, Katakuri breathed a sigh of relief and looked at Bigmom, who hadn't moved a bit from the beginning to the end, with some doubts in his heart. Unlike most of his companions who are too lazy to use their brains and are dazzled by great achievements like One Piece and Django, Katakuri did not want Bigmom to establish a country from the beginning, so he risked his life to advise him. However, he insisted on doing his own thing. How could Bigmom listen to his words? "Mom, what are you thinking?" Katakuri asked silently in his heart. Boom boom boom. At this moment, a series of deafening cannons sounded, and immediately the cannons seemed to trigger some kind of signal. The sound of horns, shouts of killing, and the roar of guns resounded inside and outside the royal city. The war has begun. The fixed fort in Wangcheng took the lead in pouring firepower. Nearly 100 cannons, each salvo, could blast a huge hole in the relatively loose battle formation of the navy, but these 100 cannons were fired smoothly. Just 2 or 3 waves. When the artillery dragged by the navy arrived at the position, the anti-shooting began. Thousands of cannonballs came and went in and out of the royal city, and the thunder-like roar filled everyone's ears. Charge! Accompanied by high-pitched shouts, the horn of the charge sounded in the naval battle formation. Accompanied by the fierce and high, but slightly tragic sound of the horn, the navy began a stepped charge. What is the concept of the charge of 10,000 people? Shout out to the sky. Earthquake. Endless smoke plumes into the sky. However, even with such a shocking charge, it was difficult to overwhelm the dozen or so people who rushed in front of the battle formation. Kizaru, Green Bull, Zephyr, Fujitora. Behind them are 10 vice-admirals. Except for the crane who sits in the middle army and commands the overall situation, and the 2 lieutenant generals who guard. All out. And their purpose is to destroy the city wall before the strong men from all countries are dispatched. Kill the enemy. However, how could Wangguo, with the Big Mom pirates at its core, allow them to do such a thing? Without any hesitation, when the strong men of the navy came to the foot of the city wall for hundreds of meters, black shadows jumped down from the city wall. Either they are surrounded by fire, or their sword intent is soaring to the sky, or their evil thoughts are volleying into the sky. Without exception, they are all cadres in the Big Mom pirates. Even Katakuri, who has been in the center of the royal city and commanded on his behalf, has also come. Under the city wall, he found his opponent. General Fujitora. Seeing that there was no Bigmom himself among the people who jumped off the city wall, many strong men in the navy suddenly looked happy, looked at each other, and nodded. Quickly solve the enemy in front of you. Then, besiege Big Mom. Boom, boom, boom. Just when the distance between the 2 powerhouses was less than 50 meters, suddenly, above the sky, 100 thunderbolts slashed down, pointing directly at the naval powerhouse. The sudden attack made the high momentum of many strong men stagnate for a moment, but at this moment, the powerhouses of all countries suddenly appeared in front of them. Dao Dao contains a terrifying momentum attack, which is released at close range. Chapter 359 The Strongest Control Field Big Mom. Boom. The battle outside the king city of Pudence gradually heated up. Countless navy soldiers followed the ladder and climbed up desperately. Every moment, someone was attacked and fell off the ladder, but every time one fell, there are 2 or even 3 people to make up for it, and the cruelty of the war is vividly displayed at this moment. And around the city walls, there are more cruel battlefields than climbing the city walls. It was an offensive and defensive battle around several gaps in the city wall that were smashed by the strong. I don't know how many sea soldiers are densely packed, and like a wave, they hit the shield wall formed by the warriors of all countries in front of them. The corpses have already covered the ground, and the blood has soaked the sand. In order to avoid slipping due to bloodstains, many sailors chose to fight barefoot. Although the hard sand and stones under their feet would cut through the soles of their feet, it was much better than slipping and losing their lives in battle. Unlike the tragic siege battle around the city wall, there are still several huge gaps outside the royal city. When everyone passes there, they will speed up their pace and go around far away. That is the battle between the nations and the navy powerhouses. More than 30 strong men were divided into several battlefields and started bloody slaughter. Fist to flesh, knife to bone, countless deadly killing techniques, all appear here. On their heads, although BIGMOM's thunder had already shifted the main target of its attack to the admiral and colonel in the offensive and defensive battle on the city wall, if anyone dared to leave the strong men of all nations and support the rest of the battlefield, then they would be greeted by continuous incessant thunder. So far, 2 vice admirals have paid the price for this. One was scorched black by electricity, seriously injured, and forced to have long legs, while the other was paralyzed by lightning and was killed by the nearby 10,000 nations. The strong man seized the opportunity and forcibly tore off an arm. So far, the vast majority of people on both sides have had their eyes red, and they have no other thoughts in their minds except to completely grind the other party to fly ashes. Kill, kill, kill. For victory, kill them all. For revenge, kill them all. For justice, kill them all. The monstrous killing intent permeated the entire battlefield, and it was not uncommon for the move to fight for one's life. In less than 5 minutes, 3 people from Wonguo fell, and among the navy, 2 people died tragically. The balance of battle seems to be tilting towards the navy. However, there are people in the mood: the more they fight, the more anxious, and the more they fight, the more uneasy. It can't go on like this. Fujitora slashed out again in the air, and the heavy gravitational slash like a mountain instantly crushed the 3 biscuit soldiers, and in one fell swoop repelled the cradle and a strong man in front of him, and by the way rescued a distant one. Dangerous Vice Admiral. Afterwards, the domineering swept the audience. The situation of various battlefields appeared in his mind, and Fujitora's face turned gloomy in an instant. The situation was exactly as he thought, not optimistic. The overall situation, of course, is dominated by the Navy, but it is far worse than the Navy's previous expectations. And this is what BIGMOM does. At the very beginning of the battle, BIGMOM used hundreds of thunderbolts to start dividing the battlefield. Since the battle, the strength divisions within each battlefield are very balanced. Balanced until Fujitora found that every navy in the battle circle can defeat the people of all countries. Of course, it is a victory in the case of a large number of battle losses. Not only that, but Fujitora has been taking the time to perceive in the battle and found that the strong men of all countries who really fight to the death are some marginal characters, or guys hired by BIGMOM from the dark world at sky-high prices. And those core members of the Big Mom Pirates, such as the cracker in front of Fujitora, are completely procrastinating. According to the strength of the Desert 4 generals, each person will have 1 or 2 strong men from all countries to cooperate, and they will face the 4 top combat powers of Fujitora, Kyabu, Zephyr, and Green Bull. Despite the cooperation of the others, the Desert 4 generals were still beaten by the generals, but if the generals wanted to kill them, it was not something that could be done in a short time. In other words, the general was held back. Even Kizaru, the fastest and most convenient to support, was held back by Katakori's domineering arrogance that could predict the future, and the extremely fast swordsman beside him. This is all about understanding the naval combat power, and then delaying the war in a targeted manner. Once the generals are unable to intervene in the battles of the rest of the battlefield, even if the lieutenant generals fight to the death and kill the rest of the powerhouses of all nations, the damage will never be small. And don't forget, the strongest person in the world has not yet started. If BIGMOM appears when everyone's physical strength is exhausted, let alone the lieutenant generals, if BIGMOM catches a fight, the generals may be killed or injured. BIGMOM, what a good plan. Fujitora scolded in his heart. The Navy is now in an embarrassing situation, either paying most of the lives of the lieutenant generals to wipe out all the powerhouses in all countries, including the 4-star generals, and then 4 generals who consume most of their physical strength to besiege BIGMOM. Either start retreating now and take the long view. The current situation must be resolved. Similar to this, Fujitora's offensive slowed down a little, and began to focus on defending the attack of the cracker. Since he couldn't kill the opponent in a short period of time, Fujitora didn't plan to kill it, and the first priority was to communicate how to break the game. Moments later, Fujitora had caught the heart of the matter. BIGMOM. The current situation is entirely the result of BIGMOM's use of thunder to divide the battlefield. Although the general can completely resist the thunder that falls from the sky, in the fierce battle, the lieutenant general is completely unable to keep up with the general's footsteps, so that as long as BIGMOM can no longer make thunder, the naval forces can be integrated. The cooperation of 2 generals is by no means as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. It is completely possible to use the least loss to fight against the powerhouses of all countries. Thinking of this, Fujitora no longer hesitated, and slammed the knife straight into the sheath, and the majestic power burst into bloom in an instant. In the next second, the ground around Fujitora suddenly sank several meters deep, as if being stepped on by a giant beast. Under the mountain-like pressure, the dozen or so biscuit soldiers around were instantly crushed into pieces, and the Kelegia and the strong men of all countries around them did not dare to take it hard and hurriedly retreated. Kazuna. BIGMOM. After pushing back the surrounding enemies, Fujitora didn't stop. Hearing Fujitora's shout, Kizaru, who was helping a vice admiral, instantly understood Fujitora's intentions. The golden light bloomed like a scorching sun, and the next moment, Kizaru also turned into a golden light and followed Fujitora. Being able to become a general, Kizaru is naturally not a fool. The reason why he didn't make the same decision as Fujitora is because he has too little contact with Fujitora, and there is no guarantee that Fujitora can see the current situation clearly. Now, since Fujitora took the initiative to speak, Kyabu naturally complied. In an instant, the 2 fastest men in the navy had disappeared behind the city wall. The departure of Fujitora and Kizaru made Cricket stunned for a while, and the next second, Katakori's roar resounded throughout the audience. Cricket, go all out. BIGMOM had explained before the battle. The thunder splits the battlefield and cannot last for too long. The Navy will definitely send someone to find me. Close black lens bracket. However, with their strength, at least 2 generals must be gathered before they can come over. In my estimation, they are nothing more than the fastest Kizaru and Fujitora. As for Lu Niu, there is too little information about him, so I won't say it for now. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Remember. When the 2 generals leave, this is your last chance. Close black lens bracket. Don't hold back, go all out. Do your best to inflict maximum damage. Close black lens bracket. When I no longer use thunder to support you, it is when the Navy counterattacks. In terms of cooperation, you can't beat the Navy at all, you must retreat as soon as possible. Close black lens bracket. Last chance. I like it. Cracker grinned and licked his lips, a bloodthirsty smile appeared on his face. The killing begins here. Chapter 360. Roha's support. Hey, Roha, how much did you give that fat pig woman? Gilgamesh on the golden ship has been watching the battles of many powerful men below since the beginning of the battle. Of course, for Gilgamesh, the battle below was nothing special, and it was no different from when he once appreciated slave fighting. However, there are some things that make him feel very familiar. Although the styles of the wrist guards and knee pads of the masters of boxing techniques of all countries, the swords of the swordsmen, and the armor of the able ones have changed a lot, under careful observation, Gilgamesh still recognizes the origin of these things. Those things are simply experiments in Roha's laboratory. Strength-enhancing bracers, jet boots, high-frequency swords, polymer nano-protective suits, power-generating rings, there are simply not too many of these things. Looking at these people, 703 Gilgamesh seemed to see the group of guys in the shadow battle department. Fully armed from head to toe. Although one piece or two pieces has little effect on the outcome of the battle, if everyone wears 5 or 6 pieces, or even more, the increase in combat effectiveness will not be too great. Originally, I thought it was your intelligence department that made a mistake. Otherwise, how could it be possible to compete with the force called the Navy just by relying on the power of the fat pig? It turned out that you were making a fool of yourself. Gilgamesh's face, there was a curious look on his face. How much did you give that fat pig, and why did you do it? Are you afraid that someone will find you through those things? Of course it's for the result. Roja smiled faintly. If you don't give them a little strength, how can you force the Navy to this point? Only when they are desperate, will they come up with what I want. Stuff. As for the stuff, I gave it more than a dozen sets, and even if I want to come to BIGMOM, I also put it on for the powerful guys. As for whether or not you can find me, don't worry. Those are specially made things with tiny bombs inside, so you don't have to worry about being captured by the Navy. Roja slowly explained while watching the battle situation. Above the sky, the leisurely appearance of the two formed a sharp contrast with the cruel battlefield. Like two worlds. Just a dozen sets. No more, Gilgamesh asked casually. However, I didn't expect that. Roja shook his head. No, I gave a little something. According to the time, it may be almost enough. What? Boom, 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 boom. Before Gilgamesh could speak, a dense roar suddenly came from the dark clouds below. Countless electric lights flashed, and the momentum was amazing. The next moment, thousands of thunderbolts suddenly fell from the sky to the battlefield, and the dazzling thunderlight illuminated the cloudy sky as if it were daytime. This time, in the Navy, a large area was cleared, causing countless casualties, and then the thundercloud dissipated. Finally, it's the last time. Roja smiled, turned the screen, and fixed the picture on the screen to the center of the King City. There is where BIGMOM is. At this moment, in the hall at the top of the center of the royal city, BIGMOM, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, slowly opened his eyes. Finally here, sensing the two tyrannical auras coming towards him in the distance, BIGMOM pouted in disdain, picked up a bottle beside him, poured a pill out of it, and swallowed it. An instant, BIGMOM's slightly weak body started to recover at an unimaginable speed due to overuse of its ability. When BIGMOM opened his eyes again, he only felt that his whole body was full of power. Shondo, what a good thing. BIGMOM picked up the bottle beside him with a little admiration, and looked inside. A white pill-like thing was rolling inside. This is part of the transaction between Roja and BIGMOM. In order for the Big Mom pirates to have the power to push the Navy to a desperate situation, in addition to a large number of technological equipment, 5 fairy beans are also part of it. The first fairy bean was swallowed and consumed by the ant in the middle of manipulating the tsunami. The second and third ones were eaten by her when she just manipulated thunder and controlled the entire battlefield. And now it's the fourth one. And the last one. Carefully put the bottle containing fairy beans close to the body. BIGMOM's huge body stood up, boundless domineering, slowly rose from BIGMOM's body. Beside BIGMOM, 3 shadows flew slowly. That is the top-level existence among all the souls controlled by BIGMOM. Sun Prometheus, Thundercloud Zeus, Bicorn Napoleon. After fully armed, BIGMOM stepped on Thundercloud Zeus and slowly came out of the hall. Above the sky in the distance, a mighty purple on burst through the sky, and the dazzling golden light appeared and disappeared from time to time. The final battle is finally here.